Recently, Gallup issued a study showing what percent of Americans are retired by age. I found it super interesting. I think you will as well. Plus, there were a few surprises, particularly as we get older in age. So let's go for a walk and let's talk about it. So Gallup did this by age group, and it started with people that were 40 to 45 years old. And I would guess, I think most of my viewers would guess too, next to 0% of Americans at that age are retired, right? Unless, maybe they were an entrepreneur, they built a successful business and they were able to sell it. They had an inheritance, or they did well in real estate, or maybe they were a Bitcoin millionaire, right? But your guess would be right. It's about 1% of people 40 to 45-year-old are retired, right? So pretty low. Same thing, 45 to 49, it's 2% of folks. And these numbers are from 2022. So these are recent numbers. The report came out about a year ago as I released this. Now we get into 50 to 54. And now we start to get a decent percentage of Americans that are retired. 50 to 54, it's 6% of us are retired at that age. And I've shared before, I live in a ski town. It tends to be one of the places that people that get to retire early like to move to. There's mountain biking in the summer, there's skiing in the winter. It's an active town. And so a fair number of my friends have already retired, have retired before they were 55. And I can tell you the folks that retired before 45, before 50, there's still a lot of life in them. And so the first couple of years of mountain biking and hiking and all the adventures and the pressure of running their company, most of these people built their own companies. They really relish in that in the early years. But after a couple of years of that, they're thinking about, maybe I want to re-engage. It'll be nice to not have to work for the money, but I want to re-engage and I want to do something that's mentally challenging and work with a group of people with a common mission, right? So these numbers all ring true to me. So again, it's 6% of 50 to 54-year-olds. Now let's go to the 55 to 59. And here it's 11%. 11% of that group is retired. And this is kind of my core audience, right? The 50 to 65, getting people to be intentional and thoughtful about when they retire, as opposed to just staying on autopilot. Because you've heard me say this before, if you're 60 years old, unfortunately, most of us, and I'm going to be 60 here. I'm close to that. I'm not 60 yet, but at 60 years old, unfortunately, most of us have less than 1,000 weeks remaining of healthy, active time. So the question is, how do we want to spend that time? And we want to be intentional and thoughtful. If we can retire at 58, 59, 60, whatever the age is, if we choose to keep working, we want to ask ourselves why, right? Because we're giving up some of our healthiest, most active years. Okay, so that is 55 to 59. Again, it's 11%. And that group, certainly the younger group, they have a fair amount of time to go until they qualify for Medicare. So one of the main things that you want to either come up with the game plan yourself or work with a professional on is, how am I going to get my healthcare insurance, right? Here in the United States, our employer provides that. So how are we going to get our healthcare insurance in that group? Because we have a long way to go. As you approach 60, if you work for a company that meets the requirements, most of us are going to qualify for what's called COBRA. And that currently lasts 18 months. I've actually heard that in California, they extended that, and now it's even longer than 18 months. I haven't double checked that. But for those of you in California, I'll just mention it's worth looking into. So, that covers us for 18 months. And then, there are the exchanges, right? The Affordable Care Act, the ACA exchanges. There's private insurance available, and there's other avenues to get your healthcare insurance. So it's not an easy task. It's not an inexpensive task, but it's a possible task. So if the only reason you're continuing to work is because you're worried about healthcare insurance, That's a good concern, don't get me wrong, but I encourage you to work with a professional. I should say, you know, none of this is financial advice for you. I don't know your situation. This is really to put some things on your radar screen, to give you some things to think about. Okay, so we talked about 11% of the 50 to 59 crowd. Now we've got big numbers. This is one of my surprises in this report. In the 60 to 64 age group, almost a third of Americans are retired. So almost a third of Americans are retiring before 65. And I think one of the reasons that was a surprise to me is the numbers have been steadily climbing as far as what the average age for retirement is, right? In 1995, here I've got the numbers here. In 1995, the average actual age of retirement was about 60, and now it's about 63. So the numbers have continued to climb over time. And so I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, that nearly a third, 32% of Americans aged 60 to 64 are retired. Okay, now we're coming into, you know, the traditional retirement age. Yes, the last age group was retiring a little bit early, and this group's retiring a little bit late. But, you know, for those of us born, I believe the cutoff is 1960 and later, you know, our full retirement age as far as Social Security goes is 67, you know. For me, my full retirement age is 67. So the 65 to 69 crowd, this is the group that's working until they get their full retirement age at Social Security. And at this point, 70% of Americans are retired. I think that's a great thing. And I wish that number was closer to 60. So more of us would have more weeks, more years, more time of healthy, active time in retirement. Of course, you know, it's not just enough to be physically healthy. We also have to be mentally healthy. We have, you know, if you're not happy, you know, how much time do you want in retirement, right? So figuring out what's going to make you passionate and excited in retirement and fulfilled is really, really important, right? As a financial advisor, I think about a financial plan, right? Those are the numbers, that's the finances of it. But part of my job too is to work with people on a retirement plan, which are the aspects outside of the financial side. You know, what are the things that are going to give you identity and purpose and meaning in retirement? And I think doing the heavy lifting of that, doing the reflective work, which I generally tell people is about 100 hours of work, I think that's really time very well spent. There's a great book by Arthur Brooks called Strength to Strength that talks about this transition from a work identity to a retirement identity. And the more homework we can do, the more clarity we can bring on what is our retirement identity, what's going to make us excited to get up in the morning. Because unfortunately, autopilot for retirees, they spend over 30 hours a week watching TV. This is the average person, the average retiree over 65, over 30 hours a week watching television. And I don't think anybody ever said, boy, I can barely wait to retire so I can watch more television. So I don't want that to happen to you. And two other videos that can help that from happening to you is this video up here that talks about the average income for retirees in America, and this video down here that talks about 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can.